my hand have found as a nest the riches of the people, and as one gathers eggs that are left, so I have gathered all the earth, and there was none to move the wing, open the mouth, or peeped. Shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth therewith? Or shall the saw magnify itself against him that shaketh it? As if the rod should shake itself against them that lift it up, or as if the staff should lift itself up, as if it were no wood.
Hello, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. A little technical difficulty there. Sorry. So we're continuing the book of Isaiah, and I'll wrap up this camera issue in a second here as soon as I figure out why it isn't working suddenly. And it's funny, you do a check right before you go on, and everything's working. Oh, there it turned on. It's strange. Anything that turns on by itself when I don't have to do anything always bothers me. Like, it'll automatically come on when you need it. Well, thank you. All right. Okay. Chapter 10. We got about 15 verses into it. 14, right? And the Assyrian is making his boast about, what he's going to do. And how easy it was. How he has conquered. How I'm just great. I did it. I am so strong. And that's how it's done. By my strength. My two hands, Shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth therewith? Or shall the saw magnify itself against him that shaketh it? Him that moves it back and forth. It's probably the idea. Him that saws with it. As if the rod should shake itself against them that lift it up. Or as if the staff should lift itself up. As if it were no wood. Simple rhetorical question. Is there a lot of depth of meaning? No, it's simple. You're an instrument of my work. And it's inappropriate for you to boast yourself by your strength. I was about to say, by my A. But I forgot I was being God there, and he wouldn't probably say that. But, he's saying, no, I'm the power behind you. You're just a tool, just an instrument. That's the thing. All things work together for those that love God. There's a purpose in the world. God has a purpose. And even the wicked serve that purpose. And they are no different than an axe or a rod or a staff that is being used as a tool. They have no agency of their own. They have their own agency in a sense. I shouldn't say it like that, they have no agency, because that's not exactly right. But I'm not a particularly strong believer in free will, because I do believe everyone does everything freely, because that's our obvious experience. No one's forcing us or manipulating us into doing things against our will. And that's not even how predestination is really presented in the Bible, as if God is making you do things. Though there are instances in the Bible of God making people do things, like he puts hooks in their jaws and causes them to err. That's something that God can do. But more in mind, I have something more like, he doesn't make you choose Captain Crunch over Crunch Berries. He doesn't, but they say, well, wait a second. If God predestinates everything, then everything down to the last detail is also predestinated. And that's true. But what I'm saying is, he doesn't have to map out what you will do. Because the thing that God has set up doesn't depend on him interfering constantly or anything like that. It depends on us just doing what we do by nature. It's like, if you wanted to predestinate the world, there are a couple ways you could go about doing it. But one way you could do it is by interfering every second and making everything, as it departs from the path you want it to go on, forcing it back onto that path. As people make choices that draw you farther and farther away, you'd have to constantly interfere more and more. That would be what, and that's not really the experience of God in the world. And well, I mean, he'd be interfering imperceptibly, but since he'd be interfering to violate our will, we should be aware of it. But it doesn't seem like that's happening, because God doesn't really do that. Not that God won't interfere with someone's will or intercede against their will, like the Apostle Paul or Jesus Christ himself. God is willing to violate your will, but he doesn't do that like on a regular basis in order to control you. That's not something God does. And he doesn't have to, because when he made the world and decided to put people in it, he put in precisely the right people. I'm free to be Paul Strangini. I can't be John Smith. I can't be some other human being I'd prefer to be, or that God would prefer me to be. He could put that person in my place. He could have had someone else born on December 4th, 1973, a different sperm and egg combination. He could have had that. And then he could get a different result. And what I'm saying is, God doesn't have to manipulate everything to get it all to work right. He only has to make sure he populates it with what the things he knows and will bring about the result. And that's the thing, is that we are predictable. We are very predictable. Especially so if you're God. If you're God, we're 100% predictable. And there's no surprises from us. So God doesn't manipulate us. He just knows us. And therefore, by putting us in particular situations, he knows what the outcome will be. And that isn't to say that he can't, if he doesn't like a path we're taking, like the Apostle Paul, just stick his nose right in and do it. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying that's not generally how he does it. He doesn't generally, manually operate people, or I should say, change them. The Assyrian is what the Assyrian is. He is the saw. He has his own nature, but God uses him for his own purposes. He doesn't change the nature of the saw. He doesn't take a bunny rabbit and turn it into a lion. He takes a saw and then he uses it for what he wants to do. The Assyrian wants to cut off nations, not a few, as we read yesterday. The Assyrian has his own goals. God will use his impulses maybe against him, but not precisely against him so much as for his own purposes. I mean, he uses the impulses of the wicked to bring about the events that he has ordained from the foundation of the earth should come to pass. And the Assyrian, and he's saying, you're just like a tool that's boasting itself to the one who manipulates it. Now, look at what a great tool I am. Look how I cut right through. I mean, I love my tools, honestly. When I think about this, I'm like, well, it is a great tool. Look how great this is a great, I have tools I prefer over others. I mean, that's fine. It doesn't, it's just an analogy anyways. But I could see how some of those tools could boast, because some of my tools are pretty amazing, I mean, they can do some amazing things. And you couldn't do this without me. That's true of me, but not the Lord. It's like, I guess I was just saying, like, you couldn't get by without me, could you? It's like, well, I couldn't do that anymore, could I? Not without you, Mr. Tool. That's right, you need me. I don't know, because when you work with tools, you begin to have a great deal of affection for them. Anyone who uses tools can tell you. Especially a reliable tool will draw out the affection of a man, especially an introvert, because of anything that serves so well brings out affection. Oddly enough, men are funny like that. They love their cars, their tools, their things. People get attached to material things. It's not great to be too attached, but I mean, to have a whimsical appreciation of how effective certain tools. I mean, there's some tools I absolutely love that I have. You know. But the point is, generally speaking, despite my appreciation for tools, it maybe goes beyond normalcy. The idea of a saw feeling, itself a bit up in the world over its owner is ridiculous, right? My saw should say to itself, I'm better than the owner. It serves me. It's just a thing. I mean, come on. My affection and interest in it is purely, it's like a joke. You know what I mean? And same thing for God is like his interest in us. It's not a joke, but it could be. It could be a really silly joke about how God gave any wit about human beings and had any interest in their welfare. What a joke. It's like me tucking my skill saw in at night or something. Just ridiculous. Oh, my reciprocating saw, I'll tuck it into the cradle at night. Therefore shall the Lord of hosts, send among his fat ones leanness, and under his glory he shall kindle a burning, like the burning of a fire. And the light of Israel shall be for a fire, and his Holy One for a flame. And it shall burn and devour his thorns and his briars in one day, and shall consume the glory of his forest, and of his fruitful field both soul and body, and they shall be as when a standard bearer fainteth. I used to think of Ezekiel 31. Behold, the Assyrian was a cedar in Lebanon, with her branches, and with a shadowing shroud. Ezekiel 31 is one of the chapters I've sung for many years. It makes me think of that with the trees of his forest and being compared to the trees. Now, there's a tree fire. We got the fat ones. Fat ones usually refers to cattle, the fat ones. Fat cattle and lean cattle. I would judge between the fat cattle and the lean cattle. It's something God talks about. Fat ones, obviously, are people who have fattened themselves, usually on society or through taxes or through fraud or other ways that they've enriched themselves and they've made themselves fat. They often are the leading lights of society in that society. Like even in Assyria, the king of Assyria is going to have wealthy people who help bankroll the whole Assyrian project, and who are his biggest backers also, and probably his closest friends. The king keeps certain people close to him. Some may not get along with him, maybe his enemies, maybe on the outs, who knows, maybe not long for this world, who can tell. But the point is, he has around him ones that have grown fat off of his success. They're always that. When people are really successful, there's usually a couple of people getting fat off the extra. There's always hangers-on, leeching and sucking and getting their little bit of blood. And the fat ones on the king of Assyria, he's saying, I'm going to send among his fat ones leanness. All of a sudden, there's not going to be so much prosperity flowing in. Because the Assyrians, their money train relied on their continual conquest. And the Assyrian Empire was a very short-lived empire. It would very quickly be consumed by the Babylonian Empire within 100 years of all this. About 100 years, which is the general, The light of Israel, and he's saying, among his ones he would send leanness, lack, getting leaner, not fat anymore. And under his glory, the glory of the king of Syria, he would kindle a burning like the burning of a fire. Not an actual burning, but a burning like the burning of a fire. And what is that? What does he mean? Well, burning like the burning of a fire, I assume it means some sort of consumption. Like the glory that is there is going to be consumed. It's going to be devoured by the fire. He's got his glory is sitting there like a pile of dried out kindling wood. It's just ready to go. Because he is so filled with pride in his glory. He is so filled with self, appreciation. And God is ready to, as he boasts himself against God himself, God is saying, you've obtained a lot of glory in all your exploits and all your conquering. I'm going to take that glory. Because whenever someone, they say pride comes before a fall, right? That's pride goeth before a fall. And there's a proverb. And before something. And I forgot what the other, it was a double proverb. Pride goeth before a fall, and arrogance before tripping up. Something like that. Not exactly. I'm making that up. Anyways, but pride, right? Because God dislikes pride so much, when you do certain things, you store up to yourself judgment against the day of judgment, as it says, So, as I, in pride, make my boast and boast and boast, scriptures say, every idle word shall men give account thereof in the day of judgment. And the Syrian has been boasting and boasting and boasting. And it's just the sort of thing that God hates, when men just make so much of themselves, and they're evil, and they're not worth all that. They're never as wonderful as they think. And so, all this boasting is the sort of thing God hates. And God is a consuming fire. You understand? So this boasting is like highly flammable. It's highly set on fireable. I hear the boasting, I want to set them on fire. That's the feeling I get from this passage. It's like, I'm going to kindle a burning under your boasting. Your boasting is very dry and brittle. It's the sort of thing that burns easy because I hate it. The more God hates something, the more easily it burns. The more like it is to wood. The light of Israel shall be for a fire. The light of Israel is God himself. He is the light of Israel. And his Holy One for a flame. Israel's Holy One. Who's the Holy One of Israel? The Lord. The Holy One of Israel. And it shall burn and devour his thorns and his briars in one day. Whose thorns and briars? I think Israel's, actually. At first I thought this was the king of Assyria. And maybe it is. I don't know. You know why I want to say that? Because of, it talked about briars and thorns coming up, and briars and thorns replacing everything. And then here it says, the wickedness burns as a fire, it shall devour the briars and thorns, kindle in the thickets of the forest, and they shall mount up like the... He's talking about the Lord's punishment for them. Well, briars and thorns aren't one-sided. They're all over the place. They're not a particularly... they don't choose sides. They represent that which is useless and comes up in place of fruit. It's like if good fruit is symbolic of our good works, of our obedience to Christ and our doing his will, then briars and thorns are the exact opposite. They're the exact opposite of fruit. In fact, it's always it should be fruit, but instead briars and thorns. Briars and thorns is the opposite of fruit. It's the kind of fruit you least... It's not just useless, like flowers are often thorns, aren't they? But it's not just useless like a flower. It is something that's positively negative, like a thorn and a thistle. So you could apply it either way. To God being like a fire and burning away the worthless works, cleansing is. That's going to be for Israel, and also for the Assyrian. They also are going to be cleansed. The Assyrians are mostly Christians. They were one of the earliest converts to Christianity. It was a promise to them in the Old Testament, and so they received Messiah pretty gladly. And they resisted the Islamitization of the Middle East for centuries. And during the, they had a really hard time during the time of the ISIS. Because they're right there in Iraq. And many of them were the Christians suffering during the time of the ISIS persecution. And so we can look at this at either form. And the briars and thorns could be a universal sense, because we got briars and thorns among the Assyrians. We got briars and thorns among the Israelites. People bringing forth evil fruit. Fruit that is not, evil fruit is nuisance. Something that's not beneficial but destructive. Thorns and briars. Who needs that? And shall consume the glory of his forest. I guess that makes most sense for the Assyrian. Whatever. The Assyrian, the forest represents the, like, him and all his lords, the lords of Assyria. The example of this, like I said, Ezekiel 31, where the king of Egypt is, or Pharaoh king of Egypt, is compared to the Assyrian through this exact tree analogy. You know what I mean? And it is trees and hills represent the exalted nature of leaders. That's why they're likened to tall trees in the forest, like they stand up above everything else. It's saying, the glory of his forest, all the glory of the kings of Assyria, the king of Assyria and his princes, is going to be consumed. His fruit and of his fruitful field. Shall consume the glory of his forest and of his fruitful field. There is a forest is not the same thing as a fruitful field. A forest is a pair of basically unprepared, raw, wild ground with trees still on it and all that. So I was explaining this to my wife the other day about how farmland is more expensive than vacant land because it is actually cleared and ready. And especially if it's plowed last year, it's ready to go. I mean, it's prepped land. It's not just forest land, which for some people would think like, well, forest would be more expensive because it's got forest all over it, but it's not like that. At least not in my area. My area, farmland is pretty expensive. As far as farmland that's in service. Though I don't know why, because it's incredibly denatured, and if they didn't fertilize it, it wouldn't produce anything. Not for long. And his fruitful field, or the glory of his fruitful field, the glory of his forest, both soul and body. It's doesn't that seem like an odd thing to throw in there? Both soul and body. We went from being highly symbolic to probably being, the soul and body is probably not symbolic of anything. Except if I apply it, the idea, I don't know. I want to know what to make of that. I'm talking about burning his glory, right? Devour his briars and thorns, consume the glory of his forest, the fruitful field, both soul and body. The glory of the forest and the fruitful field. Well, if I consider the forest to be sort of like his lords, his underlings, the glory of the forest, to be the lords of Assyria, and then the fruitful field to be the youth, the generation coming up, even where they raise up their armies and stuff, that is their fruitful field. Is their if you're looking at it as a population thing, as people, they're the place where their children come from, their civilization, soul and body, not just the externalities, but to the very soul to consume. And it's interesting because, like I said, the Assyrians are Christians. So they have been consumed in a sense. I mean, God has consumed them. They have their identity, but they're not, they've never been an empire again, and they're not, they were exceedingly warlike, But that's a cultural thing. They shall be as when a standard bearer fainteth. And I believe that means when the standard bearer in a military, as the person who carries the flag forward, it's kind of a, everyone else has got a sword and a shield, and you've got a flag. It's kind of a sucky job, if you ask me. I wouldn't want to be the standard bearer. I'd like to have a weapon. But maybe you're less of a target, right? In fact, you probably are. I mean, why? Why stab the guy? He ain't hurting you. Why are you going for the guy with the flag? But you got to bet there's always someone who's going for the guy with the flag. Right? There's some smart ass going to try to stab the guy with the flag. And, it helps keep the armies divided. Why kill that guy? Anyways, so it's not saying he dies inside, but he faints. Standard bearers faint in the battle when they grow weary and tired. This is a long battle. And I think that if your battle goes on so long that the standard bearer fainteth, I don't know. I assume that means like they lose all confidence. They lose sense of direction. Because the standard bearer helps you in the chaos of battle understand, like, our armies are over there. Where's my unit? Oh, I see the flag. And they put those standards up there so you hear maybe a rally command, through the trumpet or whatever. Like they play it with whatever. There's a rally. They say, rally! I don't know what it sounds like. I forgot what I don't know what rally sounds like. And then you head over to the flag. You rally to the flag, to the standard bearer. What if there is no standard bearer? How do you rally? You can't rally. Can't rally. Where are you going to rally? I mean, someone might go... You ever seen the movie where the guy picks up the flag and says, to me, to me? You know what I mean? That's the whole point. Everyone here, it's around the flag. Just because everybody... we need to concentrate our force because that's how armies work, with concentrations of force at a particular place. That's the whole game of it. And that's why sometimes it's not the biggest army that wins. Otherwise, it would just be the biggest army. But there's strategy involved. So, the standard bearer faints. Now you got nowhere to look to. No, it's you're on the battlefield communication of where you're supposed to be. I mean, if the command is go forward, I see like someone in, I guess the door got left open. If the command is go forward, if you don't see a standard, how do you know which direction is forward? If the command is retreat, how do you know if you're not ahead or behind the standard or in some way in relationship to it? It gives you some help. And so when a standard bearer fainteth, the army becomes somewhat disoriented. I mean, it's less organized, for sure. And I think that's got to be something along that lines, right? They shall be as when a standard, meaning they will have lost their sense of direction. They've lost their sense of, and that kind of, as the Assyrians kind of collapse, it must be what happens, because when great civilizations collapse, that's usually what's going on. They lose their sense of direction. In this country, you could say we're like when a standard bearer faints, because we don't even know what we're about anymore. Half of America thinks America is, I don't even think it's really half, but there's some percentage of the country that voted for a party that believes that America is an evil, racist place. And then there's another half that thinks it's an evil, non-racist place. I'm just kidding. But there's like this, or not just racist, but like systemically, like it's all organized. Like someone I heard saying the other day, that it's even worse than it was back in the days of slavery. That's insanity. That's really crazy. But those are the kind of people we have running around. And when you have stuff like that being said, your country sucks. How can you rally to a flag that sucks, or that you believe sucks, that you believe is a bad symbol of evil, symbol of torture and captivity, the American flag for some people? How can you rally to that flag? How can you rally to it? It's fallen to the ground, and people are stepping on it. In fact, I got a video of people stepping on our flag, not foreigners, our people, our young people, our children, not my children, somebody's kids out there stepping on the flag. Not that I confess I do fly a flag quietly in one of my buildings. You know what I mean? I've never been a big fan of ostentatious displays. Like, I don't walk around with my Bible on my, like Bill Clinton. I always remember Bill Clinton when after he got busted for the oral sex in the Oval Office, I remember reading an article by Andy Rooney, and he was saying how he didn't care for Clinton walk around with his Bible ostentatiously clutched after he got caught with adultery. He's going to church. And I'm getting right with God. It's good, but it was ostentatious means, really obviously. He's trying to give the impression. I want you to have the impression that I'm really paying attention to my Bible. And that's what, and it's fake. You know, I'm not a big fan of ostentatious displays of patriotism, religion, or anything else. Really. I'm not a big fan. So I fly a flag in secret. Or quietly, I should say. Not secret. But I wouldn't fly one outdoors. One, because it's like you got to light it at night and you got to get it out of the rain. I always hate when I see people with their flags in the rain and then at night. And I was like, if you're so patriotic, why don't you follow the rules and like respect the flag? You know, I mean, you don't have to. I don't believe in flag laws. Like, I believe you should be able to burn a flag. As far as one, you have to dispose of it. But even if you want to do it to protest, like I hate the flag, go ahead, burn it. I don't care. It's just a flag. But I don't. If I keep a flag, I keep it right and I display it properly. I don't know. I mean, if it's actual patriotism, then do it right. But when the flag falls down, when you don't respect the flag anymore, you know, they don't respect what the flag stands for. They don't respect the country that stands for. They lose confidence in their country. When we lose confidence, that makes us vulnerable. In the next 100 years, we're extremely vulnerable because we have a lack of patriotism among people. They don't like their country. They think their country stands for evil, etc., etc. How can you fight for a country that stands for evil? You know, how can you fight for a country whose flag you find this? You know, it's not like the flag has a picture of Satan on it or something. What exactly about it is so offensive? You know what I mean? What does it represent? Well, the stars represent the states and the stripes and the blue, and it's so what? You know, it doesn't make any sense. How that particular symbol. I get it why some people don't like the national anthem. You know, the references to slaves and stuff. But the point is that this is a nation of free men, not of slaves. It's not really built by slaves either. Not the nation. You know, it's like if people understood how inefficient slave labor is, you know, it's very inefficient. And there's a reason why the industrial North was much more wealthy than the poor South in the Civil War. The South was impoverished. The North was rich. Why was that? Why was that? You know? And like a lot of things like slavery and such, these outmoded ancient forms of labor and stuff, all they do is freeze society. There's no progress. There's no, you know, just like socialism, it freezes everything. There's no innovation, nothing. You know, just whatever. What I'm saying is, like, you know, it's not, they're not just getting a physical blow like fire. This fire is spiritual in nature. That's what it's saying. It's like, he will kindle a fire under his glory. Glory doesn't, you know, I mean, it's like, I will kindle a fire under his city, under his house, under his trees. But when you talk about kindling a fire in, what was it? When I'm going to kindle a fire under his glory, obviously that's symbolic. It's not literal. Because he's not going to literally kindle a fire under glory, because glory is an abstract concept. But the idea is that glory is going to be consumed and eaten up by the fire. It's going to be burned. And there will be no more glory. It's the idea of their glory going away and their previous success disappearing and the national pride falling apart. They're going to be like you know, the Assyrians were so well organized, so efficient, so absolutely just on top of everything, and then to suddenly collapse the way they did. I mean, historically, the Assyrian collapse is pretty rapid compared to other empires. I mean, it's one of the most short-lived empires. Well, we would study in the biblical thing. I mean, true empires. I mean, there are countries that oppress other countries, like the Midianites, for a period of time. They oppressed the Israelites, the Moabites, the Philistines, right? But these aren't true empires. These are just neighbors oppressing each other. The Assyrians are adding countries and regions from all over the place to a great empire that they are governing. Very different. Not, well, scale-wise, a much greater scale when we're talking about empire. And the rest of the trees of his forest shall be few, that a child may write them. You know, all the things, the great things that made Assyria great, the great men are going to be killed and destroyed. And, you know, all the glory of Assyria is passing away, what he's saying. You're boasting yourself about how great you are, how strong you are. Your empire is so short-lived, you don't even see it. A child could count them. You know, it's like 1, 2, 3, 7, 16. And you were accurate at 3, and that's how many are left. And it came to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel, and it shall come to pass in that day, and such that are escaped of the house of Jacob shall no more again stay on him that smote them, but shall stay on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. Remember it says, the Lord will take away both the staff and the stay, the whole stay of bread, the whole stay of water. That was what they were relying on. They rely on other things too. There's a reliance on food and water, obviously. But there's also the reliance on allies, neighbors, friends. And the friends they relied on were no friends, and they were not godly, and they were the heathen that God said, no, don't rely on them, rely on me. But instead they chose alliances over allegiance to God. And in so doing, they corrupted themselves and found themselves at the short end of many a siege, and eventually found themselves carried away captive. But the remnant that escape, because they're not all going to be taken captive. Not all the Israelites went into captivity. There is a remnant of Israel and a remnant of Jacob. Not just a remnant of Judah. You understand? There's a remnant of Israel that returns. It does not form the nation Israel again. When they return, they go back to Judah. And this is the point about prophecy that the people who believe in this Anglo-Israelite stuff, and it's going to seem weird for some people, why I'm bringing that up. Anglo-Israelite is the belief that some people have that the Anglo-Saxon race is essentially the descendants of the lost tribes of Israel. Now, oddly, if you're white, that means every white person is descended from the lost tribes of Israel. Because even though I am part Anglo-Saxon, because I am part English, my great-grandfather on my father's mother's side was named Came, and came to America, C-A-M-E, in the 1600s. Oh, I'm sorry, 1700s, early 1700s. I have a newspaper that goes back pretty far, but like they came really early. I think I have to look at the genealogy. But anyways, they're English. My earliest ancestors that I have tracked in America are English. And there's Dutch and all that. But it's Anglo-Saxon for the most part, right? I mean, I'm German too, so there you go. But I'm also Italian. And I met another guy who was Italian. And I realized, like, how is it we figure we're also part of this? And how is it that I don't figure myself as a mixture? And because it's clear that the Jews considered the Romans to be Gentiles. And also they considered all the barbarians to be Gentiles. And the whole thing doesn't make sense. It only makes sense when you select a few passages that support, there's all kinds of doctrines out there where people can pick a few verses out of the scriptures and convince you that the Bible as a whole teaches something. But really, they're taking a few verses out of context and they're manipulating them in your mind. Well, they're presenting them to you in a certain way, in a manipulated way, so as to get you to buy into a particular doctrine for some reason that they have a bug up their rear end about. And there's always something. Whether it's, do you know about the angels that sinned or something like that? There's always some titillating doctrine that people are going to show you that they can take a few verses out of context and make. Be careful of that. Don't allow people to mislead you based on just a little bit of scripture. And so they use these little scriptures to sort of get people this idea that the tribes were lost and they migrated and they were somewhere out there and that they are still a whole nation And then now, and like I said, now it's basically like you've heard black Hebrew Israelites. It's like white Hebrew Israelites. It's the same thing. And some of them are quite racist. And which is unfortunate because Christ, in the New Testament, the apostles taught us that there is neither Jew nor Greek, bond nor free, male nor female in Christ, for we all one. Now in the flesh we differ and there are different roles. But in that metaphysical sense, on the sense of the most basic aspect where human beings, where the rubber meets the road, what is a human? We're all the same. We're all equal. We all have the same standing. We're all equally sinful. We're all equally sinners, I should say. We're all equally condemned in that sense. Well, we're all not equally condemned because it's like there are some greater sinners than others. But my point is we are all condemned, and that's the same. The condemnation may not be as severe for all, but all mankind has gone astray. And, okay, so now I'm getting confused of, like, what are you talking about, Paul? Israel, Jacob. But the idea is that they have... I brought up the point about doctrine to warn because there are strange doctrines that obsess about what happened to the 12 tribes. And they'll try to convince you that you're basically one of them. Yeah, you are descended from the lost 12 tribes. That's the idea. And they have books. And someone asked me a question on these books at one point. It was like E. Raymond Capt and stuff like that. The problem is E. Raymond Capt's books, you read them and you think, wow, look at these maps. He made all that up. There is no evidence of any of that. That's all just made up stuff. There is no correlating. He made those maps up out of himself. There is no evidence. I searched everywhere. There's no independent confirmation information. It only goes back to, he got it from, there's like a singular 1111. There's no place where there's actual data that this comes from. There's no evidence of these migrations into, and plus those areas were already populated. The Gentiles were already there. Europe was already populated with lots of people long before the Israelites went into captivity. Long before. I hate going off on that track because I think like when I get new subscribers who aren't coming to me through my website, they don't know about Shepherd's Chapel. People who come to me through my website probably are there because of the Shepherd's Chapel, which is where I picked up that doctrine. But the idea is that, all right, let's go just back to this thing. The remnant, and those that escaped the house of Jacob. House of Jacob often is, like, I said, Ephraim is Israel. Jacob is usually referring to Judah, oddly enough. But also, obviously it refers to Israel too. What I think actually I learned a while ago is that Jacob refers to Israel in terms of the natural seed, whereas Israel, the name, refers to Israel in terms of the promise. Because Jacob was the natural son, but Israel was his name after he wrestled with God. And I should mention that Israel and Jacob are the same person. Sometimes it's so hard when you're teaching the Bible to remember to say everything that people may not know who are new. It can be such a problem. So Jacob and Israel are the same person, just a different name later on in his life. But they would no longer stay on the enemy and look to the enemies or their enemies as possible allies and protectors. The ones that are hurting you are not the ones you should look to for help. But it's kind of weird, honestly. I gotta say, man, Isaiah didn't write this very well. Sorry if you're gonna be, don't be mad at me, all right? You know why I don't like this? I'll tell you why I don't like this. Because he had said this earlier. And I like to confront all difficulties in Scripture. That's how I roll. I don't paper over it. If I see something that I don't like, I say so. You know what I mean? I don't have to protect the Bible. I'm not here to guard the Bible from scrutiny. I'm here to scrutinize. I'm going to give it scrutiny. I'm a believer But I believe mostly because when I call in the name of Jesus, the power of God descended on me. So I believe in God. And I believe in the Word of God. But I got to say, I believe in that more than this. I do. And the Word is how I learned about him, though. I mean, I got no other... I believe in this a whole lot, I should say. But I believe in him a lot more. I mean, I know because this is a translation. Because this has been... There are little things. But I mean, but here's the thing. What I've always said about the Bible... I've looked into translation errors of people talking. Oh, there's errors everywhere. Errors. You know, if you look into it, most of them are insignificant. You would hardly notice. And they don't change anything. It's not like suddenly it says, thou shalt kill. You know, it's like, oh, the Bible really says thou shalt kill. Wow. What a difference one word makes. Because that's usually the thing. It's like one word differences. Because these are not intentional changes or editorial changes. These are actual mistakes being made in copying that get, perpetuated. But then they find old copy. And oh, that should be an L, not a T or whatever. And that changes from this to thus. And it generally, most of the errors that have been discovered have very little effect on the meaning of the passage. They just affect sometimes grammar or, it's very minor effect. I mean, the deal people make about the Bible being full of errors is actually just so overblown and ignorant, because most of those people are just repeating something they've heard. They've never actually explored what is with the Bible. Okay, now why'd you say that, Paul, about that verse? They will no longer stay on him that smote them. Can you tell me why I don't like that? If you've been paying attention, I'll give you the answer. The answer is because it says, for the people turneth not to him that smiteth them, neither do they seek the Lord. It's interesting, because here it says, they don't turn to him that smites them. And down here it says, well, they're no longer going to turn to them that smite them. Right? But I understand it. I understand. He didn't make a mistake. It sounds weird, right? Doesn't it sound like a contradiction? They don't turn to the one that smites them. They do turn to the one that smites them. Because here's the difference. And they just say, shall the rod shake itself against him that hews with it? Get it? They turn to the tool. They do stay on him that smites them, but they miss who's doing it. So instead of looking to the Lord who is smiting them with the Assyrian, they look to the Assyrian. And they do. They actually seek to the Assyrian for help at first against the king of Syria and Israel, that Judah does. And Israel also, they all sort of want to ally themselves with this powerful kingdom. They don't see what a threat it is. So when it says, they will no longer stay on him that smote them, it says previously, God is the one smiting them, but he's smiting them using a rod. And just as it had said, as if the rod should do all these things, and if the rod, and this is the same thing, as if the people should take the rod for the one who swings it. It's like if I go to the scissors and say, scissors, why do you keep cutting my paper? I don't understand it. Please stop cutting my paper, scissors. Scissors, what are you doing? Stop it. Stop cutting my paper, scissors. What's going on? These scissors are insane. They're doing it all by themselves. Oh, scissors. I mean, obviously they can't do that. And the same thing with the rod that smites them. It's not the rod that smites them, it's God. God smote them with the Assyrian, and they turned to him. He was the punishment, and they turned to the punishment. It's kind of like what happens with Satan and the Antichrist in the end times. You look at the book of Revelation. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having but a short time, having great wrath, for he knoweth that he hath but a short time. I didn't quote it right. The devil's come down unto you. He's full of wrath. Whoa, look out, whoa. And they worship the dragon. They worshipped the dragon, which gave power to the beast. They worshipped and kissed his feet and licked his fingers. I made that up. But they worship the dragon. Yes. So he's the punishment. Woe unto you! The devil's come down. He's pissed off. The devil's coming and he's pissed. And you what? I'm going to worship him. He's having great wrath. He wants to destroy you. He wants to devour you like a lion. He's going, I want to eat you up. I love you, Satan. You know? And it works with all kinds of oppressive things. Oh, tobacco. I love you. How you make me feel stable once again. You know, I haven't smoked in years or used tobacco of any kind. But I understand the dependence. I do. I hated it. I don't want to be dependent on anything. I don't like being dependent on substances. Because then it's like, you got to get your stuff. You know? You're always like, where's my stuff? Where's my smokes? Where's my weed? Where's my booze? Where's my... You know, you're always like, got to get your stuff. You know? Isn't it enough to have to eat and drink? And you can't stop that. I mean, I can't like be like, I won't be hungry. That's all. I'll just stop being hungry and then problem solved. That doesn't work. But instead of staying on the one who smites them, the one who can't help them, the one who's just an instrument, who's just doing what God has ordained he should do, instead of staying on them, stay on the Lord. Rest on the Lord. You know, lean on him. Stay means lean, like to, I believe it means lean. I think that means lean. Let's look. Let's see if I'm... You know, because I don't memorize stuff in the Bible. I don't. As you can tell when I quote, it's not memorized. It's just a familiarity. And because I tried memorizing stuff, you have to... If you want to memorize something, at least if I do, I have to constantly refresh myself on that. So it's just be... It's better off just to constantly refresh it anyways and then just not have a perfect memory. An imperfect memory is good if you remember the concept. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to remember all the detailed words. Just remember the concept. All right, hold on here. Sorry, I'm going to mute this 1 second. All right, there we go. Stay is... Sha'an, to lean. Okay, yeah, to lean. I was right. Because I've done this before, and I know the feeling of what it's trying to say. Lean on him. They will not lean on the enemy. Oh, I'm on the wrong. That's the old one. They don't lean on the Lord. Well, they're going to. That's the idea. They lean on the enemy. They lean on the saw. As it says, they lean on this Pharaoh who's like a reed, and you lean on him, and it goes right into your hand. Ow! You know? It's like, I'm going to lean on Pharaoh. It's like doing this. Lean all your body weight right on that. That's what it's like to rely on Pharaoh, according to God. So obviously Pharaoh was not a particularly helpful gentleman. Okay. Okay. Stay on the Lord. The remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. They would return to God. They would. There would be a remnant, a small remnant. Remember I talked about, yet in it shall be a tenth in the teal tree. Yet in it shall be a tenth, and it shall return and shall be eaten as a teal tree or as an oak, whose substance is in them when they cast their leaves, so the holy seed shall be the substance thereof. Isaiah chapter 6, the last verses, right? I remember when I was talking about that, a couple of days later, I was thinking in my car, I was like, oh, I should have mentioned the tithe, obviously. The tithe should have come up. Yet in it shall be a tenth, like a tithe. The tenth is that which is holy to the Lord. It is that portion of your produce which was under the law to be reserved for God. As Christians, we don't pay tithes. If any minister tells you that you should pay tithes or somehow a Christian is necessary, tell him, well, don't tell him anything. Just stop listening to him. Tell him he's full of, you know what? False doctrine. That's what. So you don't have to tithe. Tithing is Old Testament law. And then just give whatever it is the Lord lays on your heart. In the New Testament, we give according to the Lord has told us to give, according he has given us. And that may mean a tithe. It may mean more than a tithe. It may mean all you have. It may mean nothing because you have nothing to give. I don't know. It may mean a portion of it may mean you give up your life. It may mean you pay it later. I don't know. But we don't have a tax anymore for the temple. We don't have a temple tax, a tithe, or a tabernacle tax. It was a tax on the people. We don't pay tithes. I don't pay tithes. I wouldn't even think about tithes. I don't even feel guilty about tithes. It's just Old Testament stuff. Do you think about phylacteries? Do you think about tying them to your forehead and on your arm? It says, thou shalt tie them. Are you sure you're circumcised? When I was young, they usually did the babies, but, nowadays they don't. Not all. Anyways, so that's that. We don't need those old laws. They passed away. I don't make a blood sacrifice. Why do I not make sacrifices for sins? Because Jesus had laid down his life. I don't need to anymore. And I don't need to keep the tithe. I give what the Lord tells me. He's my Lord. If he says give 10%, I'll give 10. If he says 15, 15. If he says give $100 and I don't know what percentage that is, that's what I give. The main thing is to be obedient to the Holy Spirit and to the Lord. If he lays something on your heart and you think it's of God, you should be obedient to it. There's very few things where giving, especially in, giving out of a pure heart and out of a righteous intention, it doesn't relieve you from the burden of ensuring, because like I said, the best of intentions are no excuse for anything. Your intentions do not excuse you. You must take responsibility for the effects of what you do. If you do something out of good intentions and it doesn't turn out well, own it. Take responsibility. Apologize. Whatever's necessary. You take responsibility for you choosing badly. Even if you meant well, it doesn't matter. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter. You chose poorly. So, own it. Doesn't mean you have to, flagellate yourself forever, but you certainly need to acknowledge the mistake. For though thy people Israel be as the sand of the sea, yet a remnant of them shall return. Just a remnant. Just like that 10% tithe. Though that was what I was saying. He used 10% because it is like a tithe. In the Old Testament, it would make sense as a tithe. Like the people return, the remnant which returns to God, which is holy to God, is a tithe of the people. So he takes the 10th, which rightfully belongs to him. He takes the ungodly and takes the 10th for himself to be his righteous seed, to repopulate the nation and to make Israel again. That's quite 10%. That's an astonishing amount of population decrease. My God. No wonder everything fell apart. No wonder, the next year everyone's just eating butter and honey because they're just eating the stuff that goes wild. We're going to, nourish a young cow and 2 sheep. He's got a weird flock. He's got a young cow and 2 sheep and drinking butter and honey. The big flocks are gone. The Syrians drove them off. The crops are all harvested, and there's not enough people to farm. There's not even enough animals to work the land. So we're going to just live off the land for a while until we recover. Remember them. The consumption decree shall overflow with righteousness. Consumption means consummation, the end. When everything comes together, like consuming, when it's all brought together into that consumption or consummation, the summation of things. And that, do I need to look it up? That's the essential force of that word. Consumption, completion, complete destruction, consumption, annihilation, kala. It means completion and also destruction. Interesting. So consumption in this sense, if you think about the consummation as being, because the consummation is both things. It is a destruction. It is a destruction of the Assyrians. It is a destruction of the Israelites who betrayed the Lord. Because the Assyrians do lose their empire at the end of all this. But the Israelite nation is destroyed, but also preserved. They're also complete. The remnant is completed and brought to safety. So there's a consummation of everything. It's not just destruction, but also preservation. And it shall overflow with righteousness. It will be right. It shall be filled up with right and overflowing. That's the idea of something that's really right unquestionably right. It overflows with righteousness. It's manifestly and obviously right. For the Lord God of hosts shall make a consumption, even determined in the midst of all the land. The Lord will bring everything to a head and complete the work that he has begun. And that's the thing, it's about completing his work. And notice, it is decreed. It is determined. I talked about Jesus. You, by the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, have with wicked hands taken and crucified our Lord. With wicked hands, according to the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God. They were just another saw. They were just another staff. Just another hammer doing God's work. But God will make that determined end. He will make it happen. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God of hosts, O my people that dwellest in Zion, be not afraid of the Assyrian. Actually, we got a few more. We're going to stop there. We'll begin at the therefore in verse 24 tomorrow. I just realized we're at for the first time I looked at the clock and I saw 1 hour and 22 seconds. We're done. Thanks for joining me in this study. We'll pick it up with verse 24 tomorrow. It's Friday, right? Yeah, so we will be here tomorrow. And after having that, I'm not gonna miss a lot of studies for a while because I think I really needed a break. Back, after when I started missing studies like 2 a week or 3 sometimes, and near the end of the last book, and I think I needed that break. And after I do Isaiah, I may take like a 1 or 2 week break because the lesson I learned from that is that I need a break from now and then. I can't just keep going on and on. I thought I could just be Iron Man, even with, I do love teaching the Bible, but I think it's maybe the morning routine that actually I get tired of. Because I do, it's like that rise and shine, and I'm not a morning person. So, thanks for joining me this day. We'll be back again tomorrow. Until then, be blessed, say your prayers, and etc. I don't have a catchphrase. Every day in his word is a good day. You know why? Jesus is the living word. All right.
And my hand hath found as a nest the riches of the people, and as one gathers eggs that are left, so I have gathered all the earth, and there was none to move the wing, open the mouth, or peeped. Shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth therewith? Or shall the saw magnify itself against him that shaketh it? As if the rod should shake itself against them that lift it up, or as if the staff should lift itself.